So today I'm in downtown Battle Creek, and we're going to explore some history going back to the 1800s to Battle Creek's first entertainment venue that was ever built, and it was not far from this location. So come along and join me for this fascinating piece of history about the Hamblin Opera House. The need for a theater in Battle Creek was driven by its location of being halfway between Detroit and Chicago on the main Michigan Central Railroad. The railroad offered access to many Broadway shows. When shows such as comedies, musicals, or dramas completed their run in New York, they often hit the road, traveling the railroad in the direction of Chicago, stopping at venues along the way. Battle Creek being along this route, it was only natural that they would eventually establish their own opera house or some sort of entertainment venue. The need for a theater was supplied by banker A.C. Hamblin, who built the Hamblin Opera House, completed in December 1868. The Opera House became the entertainment center for professional and amateur theatricals, one-nighters, stock companies, vaudeville, lectures, concerts, graduation exercises, dances, and fashionable parties. Its opening was strictly local and set the tone for its more than 3 decades of usefulness. So let's return to look at the man who conceived of the Hamblin Opera House. Alexander Carlisle Hamlin is said to have been born in Ontario, Canada. In his early life, he moved to Alexander Bay, New York, and in 1843 he wed Sarah Walton. Later that same year, he took a trip intending on settling in Rockford, Illinois. But he stopped in Battle Creek to visit a friend. He was so taken with the small village of Battle Creek at that time that he decided to stay in Battle Creek and become a member of the community. He saw the possibilities and success of Battle Creek, and it is to the benefit of the community itself that he chose to stay here. He founded the banking firm A.C. Hamblin and Company in 1859 and eventually became one of Battle Creek's wealthiest citizens. He also served as an alderman on the Common Council of Battle Creek, alongside many other prominent pioneer businessmen of the era. He was known to be a stickler for detail. Mr. Hamblin attended to every facet of his business personally and gained a reputation for strict integrity in all dealings. Mr. Hamlin was in the banking business in this city for over 30 years and never during all that time asked a man to wait until tomorrow for his money. The banking institutions during that time period in history often failed, but he and his banking principles at A.C. Hamblin and Company remained solid as a rock. At one time in those early years, during a financial panic when other persons were going down and other banks were closing, some of Mr. Hamlin's friends came to him and said, "There is to be a run on your bank tomorrow. Is there anything we can do for you?" To which he replied that he thanked them from the bottom of his heart for their offers of assistance, but he had been never better prepared for a run in his life, and they might go home with their minds at ease. The next day came, but not a single person drew their money, as they were assured that Mr. Hamlin had spoken only the exact truth in regard to his financial condition. That is just one anecdote that I came across in researching Mr. Hamlin. He was often regarded as being extremely kind and always there for those that needed help, and he often loaned money to businessmen and manufacturers, helping them through times of financial trouble and depression. During his time as a businessman in the community, he established the Hamblin business blocks, which were considered to be the most prominent in the city at the time. He also platted what was known as the Hamblin Addition, which was 323 lots almost in the center of the city for residential growth, which today is the the land around Carlisle Street and Hamblin Avenue, where the Kellogg Company headquarters is, and also the Math and Science Center. The home that he lived in with his family was on the corner of McCamley and Michigan Avenue, at that time known as Main Street. Mr. Hamlin was also the agent for the sale of tickets to and from all points of Great Britain, as depicted in this ad from 1868. And in 1869, he erected the Opera House at the cost of $40,000, which was a lot in those days, which was considered to be a monument of his confidence in the growth of the community in which his lot had been cast. And the following success of this place of amusement was considered to be a comment on his own judgment, for which many considered he had great foresight. The grand opening of the Hamblin Opera House was on New Year's Eve, December 31st, 1869. Up to 1868, the city possessed no regular place of amusement of sufficient size to induce large first-class theatrical troupes to visit the city. When the Opera House opened, it offered a handsome and substantial building which was elegant in style, and it introduced a lot of modern improvements and stage effects. The ceiling was beautifully frescoed, and the general arrangements of seats was made for design and comfort for the audience. The auditorium was 72 by 100 feet, with the gallery that surrounded it, and the seating capacity was 1,200. The auditorium and gallery were on the second floor, and on the lower floors were retail stores, most notably the New York store, which did a lot of advertisement in its day. Now let's have some fun and take a journey into the past and review, without my narration, for a few minutes, some of the wonderful, curious, and amazing yet forgotten events and performances that were held over the years during the existence of the Hamblin Opera House. Now let's look at some of the people that worked or performed at the Hamblin Opera House. Millard F. Hitchcock was literally the man behind the scenes of Battle Creek's theatrical productions. He was born in Battle Creek and began his theatrical career working with a bill posting company at the age of 18. He worked for many years at the old Hamblin Opera House. He often amused his friends with stories of hauling heavy machinery, horses, and other animals up the back steps of the Hamblin Opera House. He later worked at the Post Theater until 1907. He often described his days working at the Hamblin Opera House as being part of the original legitimate stage in Battle Creek. Ellis R. Smith was the principal manager of the Hamblin Opera House. For over a quarter of a century, he was the central figure in coordinating and organizing the amusements in the city, and he later became the manager of the Post Theater when it opened in 1902. His name shows up on many of the earlier playbills and advertisements for the various events held at the Hamblin Opera House. The advertising company that he founded had a central role of advertising and promoting the amusements and entertainment in the city. William Holden Eldred served as a financial business manager for the Hamblin Opera House for many years. He was also a banker within the community, as well as the owner and operator of the manufacturing company Queen City Brand Harness for carriages, which was a regionally well-known and popular harness company in the state of Michigan. His name also shows up on many of the earlier playbills as the business manager for the Hamblin Opera House. Vida Teresa Rowe was widely known as the pianist of Battle Creek. She was the daughter of Charles and Catherine Beecher of Battle Creek. Very early on in her life, she displayed marked musical talent and began her musical studies before she was 7 years old. She soon became known as a musical prodigy and began playing in public at the age of 8 in the Hamblin Opera House. She'd been known throughout the community and was on many programs featuring entertainment throughout the city. She played at recitals in people's homes, at churches, and even at the school throughout the years that she lived in the community. Popular actress of the day, Grace Van Studeford, played in The Golden Butterfly at the Hamblin Opera House around 1910. She was active as an actress across the country from the 1890s through the 1920s. Mary Frances Scott Siddons made her professional debut as an actress in Nottingham, England in 1866. She was probably the most well-known British Shakespearean actress to ever play in Battle Creek. In later years, she was often regarded as a woman of the century, having played in all the big theaters across the U.S. as well as England, and she performed at the Hamblin Opera House in the 1880s. In the 1880s, a popular, peculiar American interest was the frontier drama, which combined the elements of a serious play with melodramatic techniques. One of the 6 different productions of a frontier drama from 1880 to 1882 that was most famous was Frank Mayo's interpretation of Davy Crockett. The play was written by Frank Murdoch and produced for the first time in 1872. The play was performed at the Hamblin Opera House from December 1881 to April 1882. The play had become an established Battle Creek favorite, and Mayo continued to act in the role until his death in 1896. The full title of the play was Davy Crockett, or Be Sure You're Right, Then Go Ahead. The title kind of reveals the rough and ready formula behind the plot. On February 25th, 1881, the Nightly Moon advertised the new play called Peak, starring Fanny Davenport, a British actress well known for her comedic roles and melodrama. They billed the event as the Society Event of the Season. Her full name was Fanny Lily Gypsy Davenport, and she was born in London, England, but moved to America and continued her acting career and was well known as a popular stage actress until the day she died in 1898.
Serious theatrical productions were almost as popular as comic events in Battle Creek during their early 1880s. Today, most theatrical audience would scoff and ridicule the popular serious plays of the last century. So much have the tastes changed. The popular serious theater in the 19th century meant melodrama, and it was taken quite seriously by the masses of playgoers for almost 100 years. Looking at this woodcut of the famous railroad scene in Augustin Daly's Under the Gaslight, where the heroine Laura barely succeeds in freeing the good Civil War veteran who had been tied to the tracks by the ruthless villain from a speeding, approaching train, is a good example of the type of theater that was popular in that time period. Not everyone in the community was a fan of the theater or the Hamblin Opera House, however. From her earliest published views in 1866, Ellen G. White, one of the founders of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, censored theatricals at the Health Institute and wrote many statements over the years concerning the theater. Throughout her nearly 40 years of writing, she never wavered much in her condemnation of the theater. She essentially condemned three principal aspects: amateur dramatics at health institutions, amateur dramatics at literary societies, and attendance at public theaters. Her concern with the public theater appears to have arisen directly as a result of experiences in Battle Creek, Michigan, and the Hamblin Opera House. Probably her most significant general statement on the subject appeared in a writing in 1881 where she said, "Among the most dangerous resorts for pleasure is the theater. Instead of being a school of morality and virtue, as it is so often claimed, it is the very hotbed of immorality. Vicious habits and sinful propensities are strengthened and confirmed by these entertainments." However, it should be remembered that Mrs. White was not providing any new criticism of the theater in her times. In fact, she was in excellent historical company. Plato condemned the theater for debasing morals and preventing the strengthening of the state in his Republic over 2,300 years before Ellen White. Also, the established Christian church barred the pagan theater from Western Europe for centuries, echoing the sentiments of Augustine, who regretted his own early education in the classics. If you look around you even today, many parents today are often watchful of what children see or use online or stream, and there's a lot of parental controls built into our society. The rules at the Battle Creek College implicitly forbade attendance at the theater from the inception of the college in 1874 right through the 1880 to 1881 school year. The rules stated students must not be idling upon the streets after dark, nor go down to the business part of the city except upon necessary business. They later added the statement, attending parties, theater, or any entertainment of an objectionable character interferes with a student's work and exerts a wrong influence in the school. It is therefore forbidden. Not all the students heeded the rules, as one might expect. A student diary written in March of 1881, the author notes, "There's a theater downtown this evening, so much that Mr. Reed and many fellow students have gone." Another notation in the same diary by the same writer on March 21st, 1881, "We have been to the show this evening. It was boss." On November 11th, 1881, there was a show at the Hamblin Opera House called All the Rage, an American comedy. Under the title Our West End Pencil from the Saturday Evening Moon of November 12th, the reporter stated, "The West End was well represented at the theater last evening. Bad, bad." The West Enders were, of course, the Adventists, and that they were willing to attend the theater on a Sabbath gives some idea of the possible love of the theater among the West Enders. At this point, you're probably curious to know where the Hamblin Opera House stood in downtown Battle Creek. If we look at an aerial map of downtown in the location of where it stood, you'll see I've noted here Capitol Avenue and Michigan Avenue. Back in the late 1800s, the streets had different names. Michigan Avenue was known as Main Street, and Capitol Avenue, as we know it today, was Jefferson Street. Looking at the Sanborn fire map of 1887, you can see the downtown aerial view, the same view we're looking at today of what it looked like back then, and here is the Hamblin Opera House. Zooming in on the 1887 Sanborn map, you can see that there's an indication of the stage and scenery, as well as suites 15, 17, and 19, which are the 3 retail stores on the ground floor. You can also see the walkway in the back of the building that went up to the 2nd floor where the auditorium was. The 1892 Sanborn fire map shows a little bit more detail in the area as it's built up, but when you get to the close-up, it looks very similar to the 1887 map. With the one exception, the 3 suites in front are now 17, 19, and 21. So the block is getting more filled in and the addresses are being shifted. By the time the 1899 fire map is drawn, there's more detail on the back of Jackson Street, and some of the buildings have changed next to the Hamlin Opera House, but the addresses remain the same. 3 years later, a new fire map is drawn, and there's a lot more buildings along Jefferson Street, as well as more density of buildings along Main Street. Close-up view of the Opera House shows very much the same detail. In 1902, this was the last fire map that will show it as Hamblin's Opera House. By the 1907 map, it is listed as the Bijou Theater, which was leased by Walter Scott Butterfield in 1903, who changed the name and created his own theater company. And skipping ahead to the 1919 Sanborn fire map, it is no longer the Bijou Theater, it is no longer the Hamblin Opera House. The Bijou Theater is now moved over on Jackson Street in its own independent building, and this former location of the Hamblin Opera House is now a mercantile store. Looking at this photo of the Hamblin Opera House, you see the church in the background. If you look at the old 1899 Sanborn fire map and some of the earlier maps, you'll see the placement of the church in proximity to the Opera House. Its location was approximately in the present-day parking lot that is now across from Griffin's Pub in downtown. In June of 1888, Alexander Hamlin retired from the banking business. He sold his bank to Merchants National Bank and retired, although he remained on the board of directors for a few more years. He continued his interest in the Hamlin Opera House until he died in 1897. In 1903, the building was leased to Butterfield, who created the Bijou Theater. According to an article in the Battle Creek Moon Journal from February 1928, it states that Mr. Hamlin erected the Hamlin Opera House, which after reconstruction became the Toller Building and is now occupied by the Grand Leader. The Toller Building still stands in Battle Creek, right next to the Heritage Tower, which is now known as the Milton. Only the original sidewalls and foundation of the original structure stand today of the Hamlin Opera House. In 1931, the Merchants Bank built the tower on the very same block as the Hamlin Opera House. In 1902, C.W. Post opened the Post Theater, which was adjacent to the Post Building and the Post Tavern, offering a higher quality and more modern entertainment facility for the city. And ultimately, the Hamlin Opera House began to fall into decline, and it was taken over by Butterfield, who ultimately changed the name approximately in 1905 to the Bijou Theater. Then the Bijou Theater moved to the other street, as mentioned before, in 1909, and the Hamlin Opera House ceased to exist. So much of the original character of the building was lost during reconstruction, which according to Bernice Bryant Lowe in Tales of Battle Creek occurred in 1911 when it was remodeled into a department store. She also states that throughout its life, the Hamlin Opera House offered entertainment averaging 3 times a week. The house capacity was between 1,000 to 1,400 depending on the arrangement of the chairs and the amount of space they cleared for dancing. In its final full season before the Post Theater opened in 1902, the Hamlin Opera House offered 102 plays and 28 other types of shows and entertainments. That's an astounding amount of entertainment in the city for that period of time in history. And nobody alive today remembers the extensive shows, concerts, and stars that once graced the venue. But perhaps if you listen very carefully the next time you walk by, you might be able to imagine the sounds of long-forgotten laughter from the Hamlin Opera House.
So that's going to conclude our tour through history and the history of the Hamlin Opera House. If you like today's video, please take a minute to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel, and hit that little bell for notification, and I will see you next time. Thanks for coming along.